En çok satışı, her çok izlenen reklam hep en iyi satışı getirmiyormuş. Unuttuğumuz markaları da hatırladık. Mr. Stokes aktardı. Acaba yarın biz hangi markaları unutacağız bugünden? O markalar da vardı diyeceğiz. Bu gelişim hızını bir anlamda gördük. Reklam demişken, acaba reklam tüketiciye tam anlamıyla ulaşabiliyor mu? Yerini buluyor mu? Geri bildirimi nasıl alacaksınız? Ipsos'un dünyadaki reklam izleme faaliyetlerini yürüten reklam ve marka iletişim uzmanlarından bir ismi ağırlayacağız şimdi. Onu dinleyeceğiz. Gerry Hahlo, sahneye alabilir miyiz lütfen?
Thank you and good afternoon. Great pleasure to be with you, talking to you in Istanbul this afternoon. I'm Gerry Hahlo. I'm in charge of tracking approach and products globally for Ipsos in the field of brand and communications research. And this is an area that's changing very, very rapidly at the moment for me, and I'm sure it is for you as well. And it's extremely challenging, but it's also very, very exciting. And I want to talk to you today about how brand tracking can take advantage of these changes and increasingly contribute to the success of brands nowadays. This is all about predicting the future, and predicting the future is very, very hard because predictions are rooted in the present. And 150 years ago, Western Union looked at Alexander Graham Bell's invention and could not foresee telephones being an advantage over a perfectly good system of delivering messages by horseback. And they rejected the opportunity to get involved. But I do know that a lot of change is already happening in tracking. We can see it already, and more change will come. And I want to tell you a bit about how I think tracking has to respond. But before I do that, I want to just look at the context in which brand tracking operates, what's changing around it that tracking has to respond to. And the first thing is, the title of my talk was very much about brand tracking, and that was deliberate. We don't really get briefs now for advertising tracking. It's all about the brand. The brand is front and center of client priorities at the moment. And if brand is more important than ever, it stands to reason that effective brand research is more important than ever. So how can we make sure that it is effective? This is just an example from Unilever, which they've published. And it's interesting because they've defined the brand purpose that they have. And you can see from the diagram that brand purpose is right in the very heart of the organizational thinking. And it's around that a whole structure, a whole number of layers that are designed to support the brand with various information and strategy decisions. So the brand is very, very central to their thinking. And senior management no longer just looks at profit and loss. They look at brand performance as well, because brands are major assets on the balance sheet. And it's interesting, actually, both Unilever and P&G have publicly announced that they're reducing their repertoires of brands globally and focusing on those brands that are most iconic as they go forward, and presumably the most profitable as well. So, brands mean business. But the nature of brands is changing, and therefore the nature of brand management is changing, and the demands on brand managers are changing. And one of the biggest changes is that it's very hard to differentiate a brand functionally now. If you take any category, and I'm not just talking about FMCG categories, I'm talking also about services such as smartphones and finance, technology brands, automotive, all of those areas. The main products in those categories pretty much do the same sort of thing. And people are not looking for functional differentiation between brands now. They don't have much time to evaluate which brand does what best. They all do pretty much the same job. They need to be able to make effortless decisions, easy choices as consumers, because they're leading such pressurized lives. So what they want is brands that make it easy for them. And brands have to appeal to the senses, to the emotions. And hence we have organizations talking about their brand purpose, their mission statements, their environmental credentials, their sense of integrity, their leadership, their clarity, all of those different elements. Brands are now bringing stories to consumers and appealing to the emotions. We've also got, of course, the whole fragmentation of media, creating a huge number of different opportunities now for brands to connect with consumers and for consumers to interact with brands. It's a very, very complex sector. And it's open now to all of society to interact with brands in different ways, especially online. And this is not just now the preserve of the young or the preserve of the more technically astute people in society. It's everybody. There'll be plenty of people out here, I expect, with their grandparents are on Facebook. It's now everybody. It's penetrating everywhere in society. And in that environment, brand management is particularly tough and challenging, because keeping control of your story that is being told about your brand is really hard. And there are people out there who can and do influence what is said about brands. And after 60 years of being the same, television advertising in particular is changing. For 60 years, the 30-second ad has been pretty much the standard vehicle for communicating about your brand. But now a lot of brands are taking advantage of the medium and the opportunities to tell long stories and short stories about their brands and extending the stories that they tell and telling deeper stories about their brands. So Coca-Cola and Bounty and Dove are just 3 examples of brands that are really exploiting that opportunity to connect with people at a more deep and a more emotional level. But the interesting thing is, it's not just TV that's changing. Instagram has recently announced the launch of its carousel service. And this allows users to swipe on an image and get other images in the sequence of the ad. So this is really powerful. If you're a food brand and you want to show different recipe ideas to a consumer, you can do that. If you're a fashion brand, you could show different ways to wear an item. So multiple images, longer stories are even appearing in some of the digital media. Decision-making is completely changed. I'm taking the example here of the automotive industry. The number of dealership visits for people buying a car, so an expensive, high-cost item, used to be 7, it's now 1.5. The whole way in which people are buying cars has changed. We also see that nearly half of car buyers are willing to buy a car online. So for a very, very expensive, meaningful, long-lasting purchase, they're prepared to do that online. And 4/5 of them will actually pay attention to what's said on websites and by other commentators that they find online. So as the Chief Planning Officer for Nissan has said, after 125 years of doing the same thing in their industry, they're now having to completely re-engineer their operating model. It's a massive structural change for them. And then in terms of online information, I'm just taking YouTube as one example, and YouTube is a relatively mature online brand. But nonetheless, the amount of content that is being watched is increasing almost exponentially on YouTube alone. And the amount of content that's being uploaded every minute is overwhelming. It's mind-boggling. And as I said, it's everywhere in society. YouTube boasts to have over 1 billion users globally. So everybody is involved. So what I'm building up to saying is that in this overloaded information environment that consumers are operating in, brands have to be sensitive to the demands on their time. People do not have much time to pay attention to brands and complicated messages. They need simple choices. And they expect something back from the brands now. Brands have to listen to consumers, have to be more conscious of their demands, and have to give something back to people. So people are looking for that emotional connection. They're looking for brands to form a relationship with. And it stands to reason, if brands have to be more consumer-centric, then brand tracking also has to be more sensitive. We have to be very, very sensitive to the demands on people's times and how they want to interact with surveys. We have to be conscious that we can no longer operate in the way that we used to operate. Big, heavy surveys are not going to be permissible. We also have to be much more business-centric. Tracking has to be integrated with all of this huge amount of information that brand managers can have nowadays, and integrated and play its role in that. So that's what I want to talk about now in my second section, is how I think brand tracking has to innovate to help brands grow in the future, and build on some of the themes that you've already heard about today. So I think there are 4 areas in particular that tracking has to focus on. One is the right context, so making sure it plays its part in this system of information supporting the brand. It has to keep it real, by which I mean sensitive measures that really mean something. Has to do it at the right time. We have to do the research at the right time and deliver the results at the right time. And we have to interact with consumers in the right way and interact with business management teams in the right way. I want to just spend a little bit of time on each of these 4. So the right context, this is about tracking becoming part of an ecosystem of information that is supporting the brand, alongside a huge number of brand metrics that we have nowadays. There's no end to them, fans and tweets and likes and follows and mentions and all of these things. They're all very interesting, they're all important, they're all very useful, they should all be collected and used, but they don't really tell us about the impact on the brand. Tracking has to fill in a number of gaps that exist, because for a start we don't know whether all of these things are genuine or created by robots. We don't know if fans are genuinely in a relationship with the brand or whether they've just registered for a special offer. There's a lot that we can't tell from this sort of data. And also, the proportion of fans who are actively engaged with a brand online is very, very tiny. So being a fan does not signify necessarily that you're in a loyal sort of relationship with that brand. So tracking has a very important role to fill in the gaps, to tell people why things are happening. So why the clicks might be high, why the number of fans might be low for your brand. What is the thinking behind that? What do people really, what are their attitudes underneath it all? What is your brand strategy coming through? Are you getting your message to the right people in the right way? There's a lot that tracking needs to tell you about, and a lot of assumptions you can't make from data that's collected in other ways. For instance, if a proportion of your fans say that your brand is healthy, does that mean the remainder think it's unhealthy? You can't make assumptions without some structured research to back it up. And the most important thing is, a lot of the metrics that are freely available for brands are short-term reactions to activity. But actually the brands that are going to be around in the longer term are those that are creating brand love, those whose strategy is hitting home and have got a sustainable future. And you can only know that from doing structured tracking research. Second area was keeping it real. And what I mean by this is making sure that we use metrics that are really meaningful for the brand, i.e. they're related to market outcomes, and they're sensitive enough to measure the right things from consumers. So all of this online chatter that's around, I said that the metrics are important to measure. We can also turn it to our advantage by monitoring what people are saying about our brands and using it through analytics to enrich our understanding of the brand and to work with tracking data to make it richer. So this eavesdropping on online conversations becomes social intelligence that can really contribute to our understanding and can complement tracking. So perhaps you do less frequent waves of structured research and use social listening in between those waves to keep a monitor or an early warning system on what's happening to your brand. We can use neuroscience, as already been discussed, but we have technology now to integrate implicit reaction time into tracking studies because we know that the speed with which people make associations between a brand and an attribute is indicative of how strongly they hold that conviction. And we can measure that, and it can be important because sometimes that's different to our explicit understanding because people's real beliefs are unconscious or repressed. So we need to find out what they really think about brands. And I'm predicting that neuroscience will become even more important because we'll be able to improve the integration of neuroscientific measures into our tracking as we get more sort of wearable technology which gives us on-the-go biometrics, etc. And smartphones for gathering passive data, so geolocation apps that capture the time and the place and so on, can be combined with media habits to really understand the power of media placement and how we can take advantage of that. So lots of things that we can do to gather really meaningful data. And we're also working on technology which is an app to detect an audio code in commercials with soundtracks, so on TV or on internet or on radio, so we can know exactly who is exposed to a particular commercial stream and on which platform they were exposed, which if we had all of that data together with their shopping behavior and their attitudes brings us closer to big data, which is single source and is going to be used to predict behavior in the future. So that's a very exciting development. And why am I excited about audio codes and audio advertising? It's because TV is undoubtedly still the main medium for getting breakthrough brand advertising because of the broad reach. This is last year's global ad spend data, with TV still commanding 39% of global ad spend. And not only that, it's growing. It may not be growing as fast as mobile internet, for instance, but it is growing still. So TV is still the powerhouse medium for brand communication, and all of the other ways in which those films can be experienced online are enriching and helping TV to really hit home. And with programmatic buying, which means much more targeted ability to target advertising at certain channels and certain demographic groups, is going to enhance the power of TV. So I think that film advertising, TV advertising in all its forms is going to be increasingly important, and we will need the audio coding to know who exactly has been exposed and who has not. At the right time, thirdly, just doing research when it matters and delivering when it matters. So smartphones, again, we can use this up to do research that we couldn't. This brings opportunities to do research that we could not do before. For instance, people responding to questionnaires on their smartphones at the time they're making an online purchase, or when they're in a bar or a pub or something, or a shop or something like that, so that they can actually give us the experiential feedback rather than the post-rationalized feedback at a later time when they've forgotten the details. And we can run ethnographic diaries of their brand experiences as well. And delivery at the right time is using technology to speed up through automation to speed up the delivery process, so we can deliver dashboards of brand metrics that really mean something for the business right into the boardroom at the right time, taking in all of the data sources that are relevant. And some examples here: we need to visualize these dashboards in order to make them to elevate tracking into the boardroom. So that's about the World Cup, this is about financial services, and this one is looking at Super Bowl advertising. So just trying to make it a more impactful message for senior management. And lastly, in the right way. This is about communicating with people in the right way, whether it's communicating results or getting the research questions in the right way. And again, going back to smartphone technology, it allows us to create much more visually engaging surveys, also shorter, more focused surveys, but also recognizing that people increasingly will want to answer their surveys via their mobile phones. That's how they are used to communicating everywhere. And lots of cultures are skipping home ownership of computers and going straight to living their lives through smartphones. We have to respond to that, and we have to enable tracking to be done on smartphones, which means shorter questionnaires. I mean, how long are a lot of tracking questionnaires now? Let me ask you. I mean, they're 25, 30 minutes. Some are even longer. That just very soon that won't be possible. So we need to start reducing the burden on respondents and reducing our tracking questionnaires now. But there's a real benefit to us as a research industry, all of us, not the suppliers and the users of data, because if we make our questionnaires more engaging and more focused and shorter, we get better quality data and we'll have more representative samples. So there's a real incentive for us to make that change and to make it as soon as we can. And finally, in terms of in the right way, we have to work much more closely with client organizations, with advertising agencies, media agencies, and research companies all working together in one team, sharing information, being open about business challenges, being open about the knowledge that we have, and sharing that knowledge so that we can enable brand management to make an informed decision, and we can all work together to the same objectives. So, just to recap, we have to use the right context, we have to keep it real, we have to do it at the right time and in the right way. So I've encountered a number of debates about the value of brand tracking, and is it on its way out, is it dying off? And I think, as Mark Twain said when he read his own obituary in a newspaper, the report of the death of tracking is an exaggeration. I do believe that brand tracking will continue to be at the heart of successful brand management for the foreseeable future at least. I think that all of the technology advances that are around will enhance tracking and make it come to the fore to fill in the areas that the other important brand metrics cannot cover. And the really successful brands, the strongest brands, will be those that find a way to integrate all of this data into one holistic overview of brand performance that is coherent and actionable. And that's what we should all be striving for, with tracking fully involved. Thank you very much.